We pursue the things we enjoy. That's something that no one has to motivate us to do, right? Nobody's going to make me go eat lunch after this and say, you must go eat lunch at this place. Nope, I'm going to have total 100% motivation to go enjoy a meal with my family after church is over. That's a common human experience that we can probably agree with. Am I right on that? You with me? No one has to motivate you to do something that you enjoy doing. Now, and there's lots of little things I've just come to enjoy in life. I enjoy a good cup of coffee. I enjoy just being able to hang out with friends and family, even if it's just for a brief time. And no one has to make me go do those things. I enjoy them. But here is where we're kind of tracking with today. And I really want you to hear the first part of this first, because I'm afraid you'll leave with the wrong message with where we're heading today. Enjoying life is good. But making enjoyment your life is an idol. Okay? And both of those are true, because I think we're going to really focus on the last part of that for the whole rest of this message today. But I'm afraid you're going to leave here saying, so I think I don't need to enjoy things so much. I need to just be very serious and not ever enjoy anything. And that's so not what I want you to leave with. However, what we're doing this whole journey together, starting 2 weeks ago, and we got 3 more weeks after today, we're talking about these idols. We call this series Don't Have a Cow in memory of this thing that the Israelites did many, many years ago, where they created this golden statue of a cow and worshiped it instead of God. And we don't do this. I don't think anybody in this room probably has a golden statue that you've created that you're going to go home and worship today. If so, I'm glad you're here. Stop doing that. All right? That's not good. God does not want you to do that. Get rid of that statue first thing when you go home, okay? But probably you're not doing that. But what we do instead is that we create these other very subtle things that we allow to be a driving force in our life in place of God. We will follow it in ways that we should only be following God. And enjoyment can actually be an example of that. Last week we talked about the cow that we've named Seems Right. In other words, if it seems right, I'll do that. And that sounds like a very innocent thing, like, okay, I'll do what seems right. The problem is, when you look at the history of Israel, that got them into a lot of trouble. And if you look at today's culture, it's getting us in a lot of trouble now. We tend to do what just seems right, instead of putting at the very center of our minds and hearts God, who is right, who is good, who is truth, and letting that be what we follow, letting his voice be what determines what we decide is right, not what we feel is right. So if we were to take these cows that we're talking about during this series and put them on a family tree, the one we're going to look at today would be like the fraternal twin of last week's cow of Seems Right. And so today we're going to look at Feels Good. Feels good. And every one of us in this room, we like to do what feels good. No one wakes up and says, that feels bad. I think I'll do that. We don't want to do what feels bad, except for if it feels bad to do it, but ultimately it makes us feel good. Like I think of exercise. Like when I exercise, some of the times I'm thinking, I really don't want to do this, but because I know it's good for me, I'll do it. And maybe I'll feel good afterwards, which didn't to be the case. But feels good, we have this pursuit of feeling good that if we're not careful can be a very subtle cow we create that we follow in place of God. What's interesting about feel good is that it can even creep into our religion. In fact, it very much did for the ancient Jews. In the religion of Judaism, they basically found these loopholes within a very God-fearing religion to be able to still do and live by what feels good. And Jesus confronted it, actually. We're going to look at several verses in the book of Matthew chapter 5. If you have your copy of the Bible, feel free to turn there. We'll have the verses on the screen. also as well, and you can follow along on our church app if you want. Our students, and I see some of our students in the room, they've been going through Matthew 5, 6, and 7 for weeks now. Tim Blake, our youth pastor, is teaching a sermon series called Red Letter Mountain. It's kind of named after, we call this the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus preached, these 3 chapters in Matthew. And if you look in those 3 chapters, you'll just see in most of our hard copies, they take quotes of Jesus and type them in red letters. So there's this red letter after red letter after red letter of what Jesus says. And this is what he's doing. In the first chapter here of this sermon, Matthew chapter 5, there's these, what Bible scholars call these 6 antitheses, which is a big fancy way of saying, here's one thing, but I'm going to show you something different. Something antithetical to that. And what he does is he quotes some very well-known sayings that the very religious Jews would say and live by. And he quotes it. He says, you've heard this, but I tell you this. And when he does that, it's very revealing of this cow that we've created, that they have created, of feels good. So he lays a foundation about what he's about to say in verse 17. Let me read that first. Jesus says this, don't misunderstand why I've come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. Some English translations say I came to fulfill the law. So he says, first of all, I've not come to get rid of all the commands of God. I'm here to accomplish the very purpose of the commands of God. Now, stick with me for a little bit, because I'm going to read to you 2 verses at a time, about 4 or 5 of these antitheses that he said, and they're pretty cool. They're very, very telling. He starts in verse 21 by saying this, you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. All right, that's straight out of the 10 Commandments, right? And he goes on to say, but I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. All right, so he's saying, okay, you guys live by this command of not murdering, but you still do what feels good to you. It's still okay to harbor anger and display anger and go off on people and call them names and even curse them. And then that's okay as long as you're not killing anybody. He says, wrong. That's not my plan. That's not what I have for you. That's not good. It might feel good, but it's not good. All right, he gives another example, verse 27. You have heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So, hey, I know the 10 Commandments says don't commit adultery, but everything else is okay. There's the loophole, right? You can enjoy, let's just call it, you can enjoy God's creation as long as you don't act upon it. This is the loophole that people were enjoying, and it felt good to do that. And I'm here to tell you, this isn't just true of only the ancient Israelites, right? This is a modern day temptation. This is a modern day issue that even those who are trying to follow God's way might say, well, as long as I don't act upon this, I can still do these things because it feels good. And I don't think it's hurting anybody. Jesus says, wrong. It might feel good, but it's not good. He gives another example, verse 38 of Matthew 5. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. Again, very common understanding of the ancient Israel religion was, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. You do this, then you get equal retribution in kind of what you just did. That's the law of the land. And let's admit this, it feels good to do that. It feels good to get revenge. It feels good to enact justice. Now you're sitting there saying, I don't think so. Okay, I've known some really amazing, godly, Jesus-loving people. And then they get in traffic. and someone tailgates them and someone cuts them off, and I'm like, whoa, you scare me. How many of you all have slowed down to 5 or 10 miles an hour below the speed limit because that person's on your bumper? You're like, okay, you're in a hurry, are you? Turn on the oldies channel and just cruise for a little bit. Yeah. We love to get revenge. We crave it, man. Get you back for what you did for me. I mean, it feels good to get revenge. But Jesus says, nope, not good. Not good. Let me give you one more. In verse 43, you have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Isn't that interesting? And love your neighbor was a very common law. I mean, it's right there in Deuteronomy 6. It was probably the most memorized scripture of all of the Jewish families that lived. They grew up knowing this command of loving your neighbor. Interestingly enough, if you look at a hard copy of the Bible, you'll find a little asterisk or a little letter by that, and you can look down and see where that quote comes from in the Old Testament. But that will stop there, and you won't find an asterisk or a footnote about hate your enemies, because that's not even in the Old Testament. And yet this is kind of what they were perpetuating and teaching even in their religion. That in order to be a really good God-fearing Jew, you should hate the Gentiles. You should hate the Roman government. You should hate tax collectors. It's interesting. It's ironic, isn't it? And Jesus says, yeah, it might feel good to do that. It feels good to hate your enemies. Yeah. It feels good to hate your boss. It feels good to hate your ex. It feels good to hate the parent who was not there for you growing up. It feels good to hate that politician for what they stand for. It feels good, especially when other people join with you and hate them with you. It feels real good then. It's a party. Jesus says, that might feel good, but that's not good, right? And these are only some of the examples you give. Now, why would I take a whole sermon to talk about this? Because even kind of like last week, we sometimes do what seems right instead of going to God, who will tell us what is right if we'll just follow him. And we all do. This is a common human experience. Can't we just say, bless our hearts? We all do this sometimes. Let's watch it. Let's keep an eye on it. Let's pray and go home. Not make too big of a deal about it, right? Well, the reason we're making a big deal about it is because Jesus made a big deal about it. Took practically a whole chapter to talk about this. And it's not just because he says, I don't want you to feel good, guys. Come on. God don't want you to feel good. I hope you're not hearing that. Here is why he's making a big deal about this, because we ultimately feel bad if we do whatever just feels good. If we make feeling good the driving force of our life, it will take us down a path where ultimately we don't feel good. I heard someone say this, using the example of having hate. Someone was telling me this just the other day. I think it was on Thursday morning. We had a senior adult service, a worship service, and someone spoke up and said that hate ends up hurting the hater more than the hated. Ain't that the truth, right? I can't tell you how many grudges I hear people talk about that they have. A lot of people who follow Christ and are trying to live for him harbor grudges. It feels good to hold them. But I'm telling you, they hurt us more than they hurt anybody else. God doesn't want that for us. We ultimately feel bad if we just simply do whatever feels good. And I think about this. What do we have at the end of the day if we just simply live our lives? Let's go to the extreme. And let's just say we live our lives to just do what feels good for us. And let's say even at the end of the day, we really didn't hurt too many people in the process. But I just enjoyed life to the fullest. And that was it. Well, okay, so Jesus actually tells a story about this. I'm going to read to you from Luke 12. In verse 13, it says, Then someone called from the crowd, Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. There's a little family dispute here. There was supposed to be the division of the property among all the children. And apparently, one of the siblings was holding out. He said, You're supposed to divide the estate with me. Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" And then he said, "Beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Boy, is that, we need to spray paint that on the mirror that we see in the morning when we get up and brush our teeth to remind us. Life is not measured by how much you own. And I'm not just talking about, we're going to talk a little bit about possessions, but it's not even just that. It's status. It's what makes you feel good. We want to have those things. We want to collect those things. And life is not measured by that. And then it says he told him a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." And he said, "I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Now Jesus goes on to kind of vet this out and extrapolate this a little bit and teach more about it. I'm going to get to the last couple of verses he says about this, verses 33 and 34. He says, "Sell your possessions and give to those in need. This will store up treasure for you in heaven. And the purses of heaven will never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be safe. No thief can steal it, and no moth can destroy it. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be." Man, this is huge. This is really good. We could preach a whole sermon series just on this one part of Luke 12. And here's what when I hear him say this, the thing that comes to my mind is, oh my goodness, at the end of the day, at the end of my life, whatever is driving me, whatever I'm pursuing, what will I have at the very end of that? And is that what matters most? And when you ask yourself that question, that's sobering. Good career, possessions, great retirement, fame, maybe even, some measure of power, status. Tricia Blake, the wife of our youth pastor, she designs and makes all of our graphics for our sermon series, and she does such an awesome job. And when I look at the logo, it's really cool because, first of all, it makes me crave steak when I see that. To carve that baby up and let's have a roast. But when you look at all the different examples of things that we can pursue and make the center of our life, the thing that sticks out to me is that some of them, in and of themselves, aren't that bad. There are things I even want for my kids. I want them to have a good career, and I want them to have success, and I want them to be comfortable. There's some other things in there: entertainment and fame and approval, money. It's not like these are necessary. You look at them and you say, okay, you can't have any of that stuff whatsoever. The point is, when you make pursuing those things, when you make feeling good the driving force of your life, it will take you down a path that perhaps God never had for you in the first place. When you let that be kind of your guiding light. You know what's also interesting about that? Let's pause for a moment and recognize this. Sometimes the very thing we're pursuing that feels good, it actually is bad for you. Like it actually could kill you. It could actually destroy. And I think about addiction. And probably if I were to take a straw poll and have everybody in this room raise your hand if someone you know or someone you're close to has been touched with the issue of addiction, we'd have hands raised everywhere. Because it's so rampant. And I'm not saying that to condemn the addict. I'm just saying once we start pursuing what feels good, some of the things we pursue that feel good can master us. And once they get their hooks in our body or in our heart or in our mind, It is one of the most difficult things to go through to be freed of that. And as long as we're saying, well, it feels good, and we don't say, you know what, that's not enough for me anymore. If we don't recognize the bad that's coming from what we're pursuing that feels good, then we will never change. And that's just one example, and it can be lots of things that we're addicted to. I mean, lots of things that we pursue that may seem good at first that end up being destructive, tearing families apart. So I would say, at what cost do we make feeling good our number one pursuit of life? At what cost do we do that? The one thing it will cost us, if we make feeling good the number one goal of life, and we let that be our guiding force of the days of our lives, the one thing we will absolutely miss, the one thing will absolutely cost us is just fulfilling God's purpose for you. That's what you sacrifice. We've been saying it every week. You will never get to where God is leading you if you're following a cow you made. And one of those is feeling good. Like, I just do what feels good and I enjoy and it feels good. All right, this is one of those subtle things that can creep into our lives if we're not careful. We've identified it. How do we dismantle it? How do we put that in its proper place? Here's what we must do. Change your life's pursuit from feeling good to feeling God. Change your life's pursuit from feeling good to feeling God. You might be in this room today, and in honesty, you be saying, I don't feel good. I walked in here and I sat down and I don't feel good, so I'm having trouble relating to this idea of pursuing feeling good, because if I am pursuing it, I'm not doing a great job of it because I don't feel good. And what I would say to you is, that might be very good. Because I was thinking about this morning, and I was just praying and saying, God, help me to not say any wrong things. I don't know if you know what preachers do or not behind the scenes. Like, one of my biggest fears is to say something that's not true. Like, that would be bad. I need to get up and I need to tell only that which is true and teach from your word. And the one thing today as I was praying that hit me is it was almost like I had a flashback. And I could almost feel the same emotions I felt at this one point in my life. And I don't know if you've had a point in your life like this, where you felt like all you had was God. Have you ever had a moment like that before? Where nothing else was working? A moment like that, I don't want to forget. I can't say that I pursue having a moment like that, because there was a lot of stuff going on in my life when I felt that way. But the thing that came to my mind this morning was, I remember God when it was just you and me, because I had nothing else. And it was awesome. And it hit me, man, it was awesome. Because it was more than enough. Christ is more than enough for you. In fact, he's better than that. It's the best. To feel God in your life, to pursue his presence in your life, it's a different lifestyle, because what you do then is you make your life pursuit, okay, what does God want me to do? What is God's purpose for me? What is his will for my life? Not just what I enjoy, but what does he want me to do? And the only way we can know that is to be in a relationship with him, where we're talking to him, where we're interacting with him, where we're knowing him, and we know that he knows us, and we celebrate and live in his presence daily. That's what we need to be pursuing above all things. To be opening up the Bible and reading more about him, to know who he is, and praying and saying, God, help me to know you even more. And tell me what you want me to do. And then when he tells you what he wants you to do, which, listen, he tells you what he wants you to do, and you do that, you obey that, and the more you courageously obey Christ in your life and you pursue him, it changes everything. And I got a little secret for you. It feels good. It actually really feels good. The kind of good that nothing else can give. When everything else goes bad, when everything else feels bad, as you pursue Christ and let him be the center of your universe, you can still, in some strange way, feel good because you feel God. And I will tell you, there have been times in my life when I get a little convicted because if I'm not careful, I can sort of scoot Jesus off the throne of my heart and put something else there and let it be the driving force of my life. I have to watch that, right? I have to kind of keep an eye on the throne room of my heart. I was getting cracked up because I was, trying to do this Facebook Live thing. I'm trying to get on there about once a week, and I just started it recently, and getting to interact with you guys and anybody else at church. So maybe we can have a Q&A. And the first one I did, it was actually after the first sermon in this series, and I happened to notice, and other people happen to notice, that as I'm talking about be careful putting things before God, I noticed that I right behind me in the room where I do my studying at the house, right behind me, hanging on the wall, is all this Kentucky Wildcat paraphernalia. And then right beside that is a cork board where if I go to a coffee shop, and I really love coffee, I enjoy coffee. If I go to a coffee shop that's exceptionally good, I like to save the little collar that you can get that keeps you from burning your hands on the cup. I like to save that collar with their logo on it and pin it on my cork board. It's like my coffee wall of fame. I keep one of those because I have a problem. I like to collect things that mean a lot to me, okay? So I noticed that was behind me while I'm talking about be careful, you don't put stuff before God. And one of my friends who goes to church here, Amanda, says, I think I see your cow right behind you. I'm like, oh, yikes. It's so true. Yes, we can do that. Now, I enjoy coffee and I enjoy sports, but we got to be careful we don't let it be on the throne of our hearts. I will tell you this, one of my greatest joys in life, one of my most enjoyable parts of my life is my wife. And it's been that way since I've met her. She is awesome. I love her so much. But if you were to know our full story, we had a couple of big breakups. One of them really big, like 6 months. I didn't think I'd ever see her again. And long story short, God saw fit to call us to northern Kentucky where none of us had ever lived. Neither of us had ever lived, and we re-met each other. It's a really kind of a good romance story, when I think about it. But I never thought I'd see her again. We look back on that, and when we look back at those breakup times, I will tell you exactly why they happened. The reason they happened is because I let Jesus, well, no, I didn't let him. I pushed him out of the throne of my heart, and I put Sherry there instead. And it felt good to do that. It felt right to do that. In fact, most of our love songs and the Nicholas Sparks movies that we love say that's a really good thing to do, actually, right? It may make for a good love story and a good love song, but friends, it does not make for good living. It really doesn't. Because Sherry would tell you, it causes us to have a very toxic, unhealthy relationship. Because I expected her to be Jesus to me. There's only one Jesus. And He alone is worthy of our praise and worship. And I believe God created our soul with that throne room, and that every time we put anything or anyone else on that throne besides Him, we will never ultimately feel good at all. Until we let Jesus take His proper place in residence in the throne room of our heart, we will never feel the good that God has in store for us. And so we had to go through some stuff. And maybe you're going through some stuff. And I'm telling you, some of that stuff you're going through that may not feel good right now, it might be for your good so that you can feel God again. And here's what's cool. Even all of that God's doing in your life to sort of open your eyes to see how you need to put Him first and let Him take up His throne in your heart, even all that He's doing, it's for you, but it's not just for you. It's for those around you. It's for the people you live next to on your street. It's for the people that you work with. It's for the people that you have class with. It's for the people you play sports with. Because guess what? This whole world is living for what feels good. And if they've never met Jesus, they're starting to feel it like this isn't working. This isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And if you're following Jesus and He's on the throne of your heart, you have the answer of what ultimately will feel good forever. And you have it right there. And he wants you to put him on the throne of your heart, not only so that you could feel good, so that you could help others feel good. And the only way that that's going to happen is if they feel God. Let me say it like this. When you change your life's pursuit from feeling good to feeling God, you'll feel good and you'll help others feel God. I like to say it like this because that sounds really, I'll never remember that for the rest of my life because that's complicated, right? If I make Jesus my first joy, to enjoy him first above all other things in my life, then other people will experience joy because of my life. The other people that I have any kind of influence on will see the joy of the Lord in me, and they'll have a chance to have that same joy by also following Jesus. That's what we're saying. And we got to slaughter this cow of just doing what feels good. And instead, make sure we check the throne of our heart and make sure that the only thing there is a relationship with God himself, with Jesus. We talk about each week in this series that what we talk about together here on a Sunday ought to change our Monday. So I want to give you a next step to consider for this afternoon, for tomorrow morning when you wake up, for the rest of your week. One simple thing to think about. Think about this. Today, I'm going to enjoy Jesus. I would add the word first above all things. Today, I'm going to enjoy Jesus and be a joy to someone else. And whatever's going on in your life right now, what enjoying Jesus might look like for you is falling at his feet in tears because you're going through so much stuff right now that you don't think you can enjoy anything. And the only way you're going to enjoy Jesus is just crumpling at his feet and saying, oh God, you got to carry me. For someone else in this room, it might be, well, I've just been pursuing very successfully these pleasures in my life and it's going really well, but I don't know that I'm really pursuing God at all right now. And I'm here to tell you, at the end of the day, you may accomplish your pursuit of feeling good, but if you don't feel God, it won't feel good. And it's time to shift. It's time to reroute, to change your life's pursuit to feeling God instead of feeling good. Will you take a next step to do that today? Let's pray together. Father, we come before you now. And we ask that you help us. Help us to clean out the throne room of our life, to rid it of all the things that we pursue before you. And if we're being honest, there's so many. God, help us to put in its proper place the enjoyment of life. That if we enjoy you first and foremost, that we'll experience true joy. Lord, you've taught us that today. But God is going to take a step that we're going to have to take to change. Help us to do that, Father. Give us the courage and the strength to make a change today, to pursue you above all other things. In this room right now, someone's needing to kick something off the throne of their heart. Give them the courage to do that right now. God, there's someone in this room that doesn't feel good at all, but Lord, give them a taste of the joy of your presence right now. God, have your way with us as we pursue you now. In Jesus' name, amen.